Good morning. Good morning and welcome to the Unitarian Universalist Congregation of Erie. My name is Kristina Church, and it is my pleasure and my privilege to serve this wonderful community as its minister. And I welcome you if you've been here hundreds of times or if you've just stepped into the Zoom room this morning. You are very welcome here. We're glad you're with us. We have a tradition here to call the faithful to our Sunday service with the sound of a bell. And since we are on Zoom, we have to make that sound ourselves. So I invite you to get something to make a joyful noise with. And as it says on your screen, we welcome stranger and friend into this time of mindfulness. So please unmute yourselves and ring those bells. I love it. I love it. Welcome. Welcome one and all. To continue the joyful welcome, we also like to sing Hal Walker's welcoming song each Sunday. Each Sunday, a different singer shares their version. And today we're lucky to have Brian Head to share the welcoming song with us. Brian?
Sure, I'm unmuted. Whoever you are, we welcome you. Wherever you come from, we welcome you. Whomever you love, we welcome you. Whoever you are, we welcome you. Wherever you come from, we welcome you. Whomever you love, we welcome you. Whomever you love, we welcome you. Whomever you love, we welcome you.
Thank you, Brian. We welcome you. Wherever you are today, whether you're in Erie or someplace else in the world, we're so glad that you're with us. Our opening words this morning for this Ramadan service are from Sufi mystic and poet Jalaluddin Rumi. Last night, I learned how to be a lover of God, to live in this world and call nothing my own. I looked inward, and the beauty of my own emptiness filled me till dawn. It enveloped me like a mine of rubies. Its hue clothed me in red silk. Within the cavern of my soul, I heard the voice of a lover crying, "Drink now, drink now." I took a sip and saw the vast ocean, wave upon wave, caressed my soul. The lovers of God dance around, and the circle of their steps becomes a ring of fire around my neck. Heaven calls me with its vein and its thunder. 100,000 cries, yes, but I cannot hear. All I hear is the call of my beloved. And now Jackson has a beautiful piece for us to continue the welcome and bring us into a deeper space of worship. It's Bourrée in E minor by Johann Sebastian Bach.
All right.
Thank you, Jackson. The flaming chalice is the symbol of our faith, and we light one each Sunday. I invite you to light your own chalice at home if you have one, or a candle if you would like to join in this tradition. As I read this chalice lighting that's been adapted for the month of Ramadan. In this month of Ramadan, a season of holy light and holy darkness, we strive as Unitarian Universalists to build the beloved community where all souls from all wisdom traditions are welcome as blessings, and the human family lives whole and reconciled. With this vision in our hearts and our minds, we light our chalice. Now, along with our chalice, we also have other traditions. We are a community that is bound to one another by bonds of love and care, and by a covenant that expresses how we will be together and how we will live in the world. The first one we will share this morning is the Universal Covenant. And is there anyone who would like to lead us in this covenant with, along with the hand gestures and the words that are on the screen?
Janet will.
Thank you, Janet.
We are Unitarian Universalists, a people of open minds, loving hearts, and welcoming hands. We care for the earth and each other.
Thank you. And as we get closer to Earth Day, it's wonderful that we've added those last two lines to the Universal Covenant to express our care for all of the earth and all the earth's creatures. Our second bond of union or covenant was adopted in 1898 and is specific to this congregation. It's been in continuous use, and we say it each Sunday morning. I will say the words, and I invite you to say them along with me. The words are on your screen. We unite ourselves together for the study and practice of morality and religion, as interpreted by the growing thought and noblest lives of humanity, believing that we may thereby prove helpful one to another and promote the cause of truth, righteousness, and love in the world. And now is the time for all ages, and I have a story for you that reflects the theme of this holy month of Ramadan. Ramadan is a month-long holiday celebrated by Muslims all over the world, and it's named after the month in which it occurs, the month of Ramadan. And all kinds of stories are shared during that time, just like we have all sorts of Christmas stories in the Christian culture, or there are all sorts of stories around, for example, Yom Kippur, and there are things that are sort of almost like fairy tales. And so this might feel a bit like a fairy tale to you. And I love it because there are children in the fairy tale, and they have a very special role at the end of the story. So listen for that very special role that the children play. Once upon a time, there was a young prince, and he lived alone with his father, the Caliph, after his mother died. And the Caliph married again, but his new wife was often very unkind to the little prince. And the Caliph didn't care much about that. And that made the prince very unhappy. So on the 15th day of the month of Sha'aban, the son said to his pet pigeon, well, let's not stay here anymore. Let's just run away because nobody here cares about us and father's new wife is so mean. Let's just go. So they ran away, the prince and the pigeon, into the jungle. And after a long time, they came to a great big palace, which belonged to a lonely ghoul, a ghost. And the prince said, oh, this palace looks awful and scary, but we're so hungry and cold, and I think we should just sneak in and rest here until the morning, and then we can find a better place. But the ghost was listening. He was watching the prince and the pigeon. Well, the prince came in and he found a bed and he fell asleep. But when he woke up, he was surrounded by golden prison bars. He was in a kind of a jail. And the ghost said to him, I know all about your evil stepmother, and I know about your father that doesn't love you. And I'm very lonely here, so I'm going to keep you as a pet. Well, the little prince was very afraid, and he pleaded with the ghost to set him free so he could go home. Finally, the ghost said, I'll send your pigeon home. And if the caliph really misses you, he'll follow the pigeon back here to come to get you and save you. But if he doesn't, you'll spend the rest of your life here with me. So the pigeon flew out the window and raced home to the caliph's palace. Now, since his son had run away, the caliph was very, very unhappy and repentant. That means he was sorry for being uncaring. He had cried and he had prayed every single night that he would see his son before the holy month of Ramadan began. So on the last night of the month of Sha'aban, he felt his son very, very close. So he went to the window and he found that the pigeon, his son's pigeon, was sitting on the ledge. And he knew that he had to follow the pigeon back to wherever the pigeon would take him. But it was very, very dark and the caliph could not see. Now, a little princess, the prince's sister, suggested that everyone in the palace should hold a candle or a lantern and light the way for the grieving father. So in minutes, the news spread throughout the caliphdom that every man and every woman and every child should hold a candle or a lantern and follow the caliph. Now on their way, the children sang songs to celebrate the beginning of the holy month. And the prince in his prison heard those songs and he saw the light from his prison window and he knew that it was his father coming to save him. Even the ghost was touched by this scene and he whispered to the prince, I was wrong. Your father does love you. Go home. Your father deserves a second chance. So the young prince was reunited with his father and with his family, and they returned to the caliph's palace and they fasted together on the first day of Ramadan. And to reward all of his loyal subjects, the caliph gave them all golden lanterns to put outside of their houses. And then he ordered his ministers to light all of the streets and the mosques with colorful lamps. And since that day, the children of all of the country have bought lanterns to mark the beginning of this holy month of Ramadan, the season of light and the season of darkness. And now is a time for another one of our holy practices, which is the practice of generosity. Each week, we take an offering to support the work of this congregation inside its walls and also in the community. So I invite you, as we listen to an original piece of Jackson's, Travel in a Caravan, to make a practice of generosity by sharing what you can. Make your check payable to UUCE, and you can mail it to the address on your screen, or you can also go to the website, uuerie.org/donate. And if the payment is towards your pledge, please do let us know. I'm not hearing any sound. Is anyone else having trouble hearing it?
No sound here.
No sound here.
There never was a time we could be standing still, covering ground we get around like a dollar bill. Everyone's worth more than anything in one's hand. Heart beating true, when the wind blew way out beyond the land. Traveling in a caravan, we're flowing in the sand. Under the sun, this is the run, 1001 command. Every day's a brand new plan, the water's through the 14 can. I don't mind if I'm last in line, traveling the caravan. Traveling a 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 caravan.
Well, Ramadan Kareem, which means happy, blessed Ramadan. April 12th was the beginning of this holy month of Ramadan in the Islamic calendar. And if you are not from a Muslim background, then like me, you may have spent a lot of your life not knowing very much about this month-long holiday. And you may be wondering why we would be talking about Islam at all. And the reason is because Unitarian Universalism is a faith that draws its living tradition from 6 explicitly named sources. And one of these sources is wisdom from the world's religions, which inspires us in our ethical and our spiritual life. And as one of the world's great religious traditions, Islam, which is a religion delivered to the world by its prophet and its messenger, Muhammad, is a powerful vehicle of ethics and spirituality. And during this month of Ramadan, it's an appropriate time for us to take a deeper look at its many teachings and traditions. Now, I am sorry to say that in my younger life, the only time I really heard the word Ramadan was through casual TV news reports of a bomb going off or some military conflict in some faraway land. And the reporter would observe that this conflict was taking place during the holy month of Ramadan. Now, in such a way, we in the West come to associate Islamic traditions with war and strife. We may never take in the fact that the word Islam itself is derived from the Arabic root salam, which means literally peace. And it's related to the Hebrew word shalom, which of course also means peace. Now, later on in my life, I learned that the traditions of Ramadan involve fasting from sunup until sundown and the recitation of verses from the Quran. Now, this sounded to me, from my own cultural biases, like a holiday that was all about drudgery and sacrifice and suffering. But I couldn't have been more wrong about that. But my Western brain that was shaped by centuries of Christianity, whether or not I personally adhered to Christianity, I couldn't imagine the richness of this holiday without having a little bit of help to get me past some of my misconceptions. So I'm fortunate that last month I was able to attend an interfaith event that was all about Ramadan, sharing it with people from all faiths and all cultural perspectives. And through a series of music performances and poetry readings and discussions and lectures, I came away with not only spiritual nourishment, but a much deeper understanding about Ramadan. So now it's my privilege to be able to share some of what I learned with all of you today. Now, as Unitarian Universalists, we may have a tendency to think of spiritual practices as solo events, practiced in privacy and isolation, perhaps, or with strangers, maybe at a yoga studio or a group meditation event. But spiritual leaders like Jesus, the Buddha, Muhammad, they are all in agreement that spirituality ought to be practiced best in a community who can keep us on track, who can provide support to us when we're struggling, and to amplify each other's efforts for justice and peace in the world. So I invite you today to think of Ramadan as we learn about it as a community spiritual practice, one that's also a month-long cultural holiday of great significance in many parts of the world where Islam is a major religious holiday, a religious identity, sorry. To begin with, it's important to share with you that every speaker I listened to at the event last month emphasized that Ramadan is an inclusive holiday. So all of us are welcome to learn about it, to take part in whatever way we find meaningful, because Ramadan is for everyone. Now, what time of the year does Ramadan fall? I have a pretty good feel for holidays most of the time, even those from faiths that aren't a part of my direct heritage, but somehow I could never really get a handle on what time of the year Ramadan happens. And I've learned that because of the way the Islamic calendar follows the lunar calendar, instead of the solar calendar, the month of Ramadan actually travels around the seasons. So in 10 years, Ramadan will be in a completely different season than it is today. And this kind of seasonlessness of Ramadan actually kind of makes sense for this holiday that is all about an interior practice, going inside of ourselves, receiving interior understanding and illumination from God, rather than looking to God's creation, the world, for answers. As it's sometimes expressed, Muslims are called to turn away from creation and turn toward the creator of all things during this special time that's set aside. Now, the month of Ramadan was also the time when the prophet of the Islamic faith, Muhammad, turned away from the strife of the world and away from humanity's dramas of war and political conflict in order to go inside of a cave and hold himself apart and fast and pray. And so Muslims believe that an angel came from God to deliver the words of their holy book, the Quran, for him to memorize and bring back to the people. Because Muhammad was not able to read and write, he needed to learn the words by heart and recite them. And so some Muslims believe that in the time of Ramadan, the veil between humans and their God becomes very thin. And it's possible to approach God and know God more fully during this month. So in order to do this with the proper reverence, people all over the world who identify as Muslim celebrate by practicing in the same way that Muhammad did, by reciting the words of the Quran, turning away from the things of this world, which is symbolized by fasting from food, from drink, from sex, turning away from the things of the world during daylight hours. And the overall goal, as I understand it now, is to develop humility and patience, a kind of self-control that can increase our spiritual maturity and help us have a closer relationship with the divine, which is the entire goal of the Islamic faith, to come closer to the divine. Fasting and withdrawing from our normal, busy daily activities, it sort of turns down the volume of the distractions that keep us from using each minute of our lives to pay attention to what's eternal, what's really important, what's really true. So fasting in Islamic traditions is not meant as deprivation or as a kind of Olympics of suffering or to prove to God that we can make sacrifices. It's not about that. It's about increasing our ability to reflect and find true wisdom and move closer to God. So, as I said, the fasting is not about suffering, and therefore, young children, women who are pregnant or menstruating, people who live with conditions that would make it difficult to fast, like diabetes or other medical conditions, are exempt from fasting, but they can still take part in the festivities because, as I said, Ramadan is an inclusive and a joyful time. And so one of the things that I've learned recently is how joyful those early breakfasts are when people get together with their families and have special foods that will sustain them throughout the day. And then after the sun goes down, to have a special time where you eat wonderful foods with those who have gathered and just enjoy being together in a different kind of a way than you would during the rest of the year. So far, we've heard about prayer and we've heard about fasting, and there's another aspect to the Ramadan holiday, which is called the cleansing of charity. Throughout the Quran, Muslims are instructed to practice justice in the form of financial and material support of those in their community who have much less than they do. And in mosques and Muslim communities, there's a practice of zakat, which is the word actually literally for cleansing, with specific guidelines for giving that are based not just on your income, your yearly income, but on your total wealth. And by practicing this zakat or cleansing, Muslims believe that their remaining wealth will then be blessed by God because they have taken the time to practice charity and community care by giving what they have. At Ramadan, there's a special call to this kind of generosity, zakat. And in addition, this month is an opportunity for a kind of repentance, for asking forgiveness of those that your actions may have wronged in the past. So by getting into right relationship with the people in our own lives that we may have harmed, we can then get back into right relationship and come closer to the divine. And so on this day in the holy month of Ramadan, I realized that most of us, no matter how intrigued we may be by Islam and its traditions, we might not be quite ready to practice sun up to sundown fast for 30 days or to learn to recite the Quran by heart in Arabic, or even to consider tithing large percentages of our wealth to community organizations that help those in need, although some of us may certainly be doing that. But can we be uplifted by the spirit of Ramadan in our own ways that make sense for us in our own lives? Can we find what's called the polish of prayer in our own way? Can we vow to read or reread a book that has deep meaning for us and to reconnect with its beautiful and beloved passages? Can we find some quiet time to connect with what is sacred in our own hearts, however we may define that? I invite you to find an inspiring practice, one that reminds you of what is of deepest significance to your life over the next 30 days. And what about what's called the chisel of fasting? Most of us don't want to think about being chiseled into a different shape by fasting, but maybe sometimes we really do need to turn down the volume of daily life in order to get back into balance with ourselves and with our universe. In this world of neon lights and sparkly glitter, and 24-hour internet availability, could you let darkness be your candle for a little while? Is there something in your life that needs to have the volume turned down a little bit so that you can focus on what really matters to you? Could something in your life benefit from a practice of deep humility and patience and self-control? And finally, the cleansing of charity. As UUs, we're called to work for justice and equity in human relationships. How can we live out this value in our own lives and as a community, particularly in places like Syria, Yemen, Afghanistan, and at our own southern border, where so many are suffering? And finally, repentance, because it isn't just our livelihoods that sometimes need cleansing. When we've behaved badly, when we've hurt someone in our lives, or abandoned a promise, or not lived into our own ideals, can we let the promise of renewal guide us into making amends so that we may begin again in love with our human family and with our sense of the divine, whatever or whoever that looks like for us? So, in this beautiful month, this holy month of Ramadan, I invite you to just take whatever feels helpful or useful to you in your life right now and let it inspire you for the next few weeks. Ramadan practices deep reflection, a practice of repentance, if need be, or maybe just further exploration wherever your heart and your soul leads you. In this cavern of your soul, let emptiness fill you. Let darkness be your candle, as Rumi says. Let your heart be touched by the spirit of Ramadan. And let a practice of patience and self-control and humility teach us the lessons that they have to give. Ramadan Mubarak. Happy Ramadan. May it be a month filled with blessings for all of us. Alhamdulillah, Alhamdulillah, Alhamdulillah. 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 Alhamdulillah. Alleluia. Many blessings. And now we come to the sacred time in the service when we share our joys and concerns with one another. And today I am particularly holding in my heart the families of those who have been killed over the past week in Indianapolis, in Chicago, in Minnesota, and in other places around our country. And I am holding in my heart the hope that we will find a way to stop the senseless violence, the killing of innocent people, and the harm that's being done to US citizens in their own homes and in their own towns. I invite you to use the chat box to share with us what you would like about how you're feeling. And there's no need to respond to one another's entries. We are simply bearing witness to one another's hearts and minds today. As we do so, we have a special treat for you, which is traditional nasheed, which is a music of religious piety, and it's specially written for Ramadan, performed by the Rose Ensemble of musicians and vocalists. It's called La Ahash Allah. And I will also tell you that the musical modalities that are used here are making use of half tones and quarter tones that we're not used to hearing in our Western music. And so sometimes that can sound like the music is out of tune, like the instruments are out of tune, but those are actually notes in between the notes that we're used to hearing. So it may sound unusual to you, but I invite you to open your ears and open your heart to the beauty.
شهر رمضان ما أوحش الله منك يا شهر رمضان لو حاشا الله لو حاشا الله يا الله لو حاشا الله منك يا شهر رمضان لو حاشا الله منك يا شهر رمضان
In the sharing of joys and concerns with one another today, I saw expressions of loneliness and concern for our nation over recent tragic events. I saw sadness and worry, and there was also joy at new births and energy for new projects, anticipation of reunions with loved ones, love for the music, and appreciation for the opportunity to learn and grow here together. Thank you to all who shared. We hold all of these joys and concerns in our hearts, as well as those that are too tender to share right now. We hold them with love. Our closing words today are from, I want to get this right, so let me look here, are from Mahmoud Shabistari, a Sufi writer and philosopher. Go sweep out the chamber of your heart. Make it ready to be the dwelling place of the beloved. When you depart, she will enter. In that void, she will display her beauty. Now it's time to extinguish our chalices. If you have one at home, if you've lit a candle or a chalice, I invite you to blow it out at this time. As I say these words from Reverend Madi Sifantus. We extinguish this flame, but we keep its light in our hearts with its message of love and of justice, taking it outside these virtual walls into the real world that we live in until we are together again. Now Jackson will play us another beautiful piece to play us out of our formal service today. We are so lucky to have such a multi-talented group of musicians here. And Jackson, you just continue to share with us so many of your gifts. Thank you so much.